Hi, everyone. This is Marisa B, host of Radiant Living, Inspiring Humanity to Thrive. I'm so thrilled today to speak with Lauren Millman. She's an internationally known best-selling author. She is a coach and counselor for marriage and divorce. She is a parenting specialist. She has won the International Women in Leadership Award. Hello, Lauren, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Marissa. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing? I know, of course, as a therapist, we always grow and we try to help our clients the best we can. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing nowadays?
Absolutely. I'd love to share that with you. I'm so excited to be on this new path that I'm on. So I spent the last 20 years under the counseling and therapy umbrella, as you mentioned, doing marriage counseling, separation, divorce, parenting, anxiety, overwhelm, grief and loss, all that great stuff. And coming out of COVID, I, was feeling like I needed more, not necessarily more in my life, but to be able to do more for others. And I'm excited to announce that over the last couple of months, I've been working on moving my entire practice and focus over to under the coaching umbrella, and focusing on helping men and women create sustainable boundaries and improve their communication. It's been such a wonderful ride, and yet another iteration under my belt of who I am becoming, and still have yet to become.
Well, isn't it funny? Because as we had spoken before, coaching is different, of course, than therapy. It's in the now. It's moving forward. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So I still do, some aspects of methodology when I'm with my clients in the counseling and therapy forum. But most of the people that I'm seeing now, really, are taking a good look at their lives, working with a lot of men and women who are between the ages of 40 and 80. I actually just signed a client today who is 82, and I'm so honored to be able to help somebody who has such wisdom. But we are always moving and always transcending and always growing and always needing to learn. So I thought to myself, while I'm upgrading myself, how can I help my clients to upgrade? And so that was the first foray, or the first footing into considering moving myself and my practice into the coaching industry, the coaching forum, to be able to help people, really take a good look at, where they are, and not necessarily where they were for the duration of the time that I see them. Certainly we do some work in the past, and we do some work in our blueprints, how we were raised, and all of those experiences that happened between the ages of 4 and onward, and move people forward so that they're stepping into really truly living who they really want to be, because life is short at the end of the day.
Yes. It's true. It's very true. And I know that today we were going to talk a little bit about the mother wound, which is intergenerational and felt by, I know, not just women, men as well, but on a different level. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I know that you've spoken about it extensively. I know that you've written for a lot of publications, both online and in print, and you've been on a lot of programs talking about different subjects, of course. But I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about that today.
Yeah, sure. And it's really interesting too, because, while the mother wound does certainly affect men and women in different ways, it does affect both men and women. And I'll just touch very briefly upon men. We oftentimes we'll see men who are a little more coarse, if you will, in
Mm-hmm.
their approach, a little more defensive. And, this often has to do with their armor and their mother wound, or more appropriately, their father wound.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the aspects of our blueprints, not our genetic blueprints, but our emotionally developed blueprints that we carry with us throughout our lives, that we don't necessarily realize that we're operating on this blueprint system, until some sort of traumatic event occurs. We actually have the time and the space to sit down in the quiet with ourselves and, really think about, why am I behaving this way? And, why does this trigger me? And why do I end up feeling like this or like that? So when we talk about the mother wound for women, which I'll focus on our discussion in today, we're talking about that blueprint. We're talking about, how we're raised to be good girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be a good girl, behave and keep quiet and, know your place. And we don't realize how these words and how these actions or non-actions that happen or don't happen in our lives when we're growing up, or even when we're older, affect us to the point where, when we go to express ourselves or offer our opinions, they either don't come out, or they come out in ways that are somewhat exemplary of guilt or shame or blame, where we're then feeling unworthy, or we're feeling we're undeserving, or we don't deserve that. And so we go back to that blueprint. Well, I should be more like this. And in fact, this is where I do a lot of deep work with the clients that I work with, in addressing, those aspects of the blueprint that have, by the time we're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, affected us in a way where we're not showing up the way we want to show up, where it comes to a point where you look in the mirror, or you have a moment where you realize, my God, I'm not the person who I was meant to be. I really want to be that person. How do I become that person without reaping or suffering or inviting the repercussions of others? Repercussions like judgment, criticism, worthiness. Again, it's this Ferris wheel of, I feel lesser than. I was told this once before, therefore I've grown up believing it, or I didn't receive this at some point, therefore I don't feel deserving of it. And everybody, no matter what your blueprint is, what your upbringing is, no matter what someone once said to you when you were 4 or 10, or how somebody treated you or didn't treat you when you were 20 or 30, you do deserve all your needs to be met, and you deserve to have everything in your life that you need to live a full, deep, meaningful, wealthy life.
Right. Absolutely. I agree 100%. In order to have a rich and radiant life, you have to have what you want to have, and no one should say otherwise. It's true. And it's almost though as women, we're taught to stay small, be small.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're criticized, or the finger of accusations pointed at you, that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Almost women are less than or inferior.
Right. Exactly. Well, we're in our 40s, 50s, 60s. Think about it. Way back when I'm in my 50s. My parents were raised still, in the generation where women didn't become, right? The men become, the young men became. they would go off to school, they would work, and women still back in the, early 60s and mid 60s, they had opportunities, but they weren't, professional opportunities. And this is the thing, that we have to remember when, we're feeling resentment or we're feeling angry toward a portion of our upbringing. Our mothers and fathers, only were able to do the best they could with what they had.
That's right. The tools they had. Yes.
Really big pill to swallow. It doesn't sound fair. It doesn't sound rational. It certainly doesn't sound, like it's something that you can work with, in this day and age. And certainly, I'm not wanting to blame anybody, but the circumstances are what the circumstances are. It's like when you're making plans with somebody who's just gone through a separation or a divorce. Context really plays into a lot of the meaning making that you put into and get out of a situation or a context or a conversation that you're having. That person is not necessarily going to always want to go out and be happy and joyful and fun. They're only, doing the very best with what they've got at that moment in time. And back when, the blueprint suggests that, our mothers, for instance, when we're talking about that mother wound, they weren't armed with go out and become somebody. That wasn't what they were taught. They also might not have been exposed to a lot of love and emotion. And so in raising their children who would be, women like you and I, may not have been raised by mothers who were loving enough or who gave them enough. And these are the blueprints, but recognizing and being aware of these blueprints doesn't mean that you need to continue living like this.
Right.
It's awareness.
I would assume forgiveness too. Forgiving,
yes.
right? Forgiving the past, forgiving yourself for feeling that way, forgiving
Absolutely.
yourself for not attempting to overcome things. I'm sure
Absolutely.
that's a big thing, the forgiveness portion
Absolutely.
of it.
Yes, and that's another very big pill to swallow because, I think that deep down inside, we know that forgiveness is the thing to do, not just to forgive our mothers, our fathers, those in the past who have hurt us, but ourselves too. Forgiving ourselves for feeling as though we're trapped and forgiving ourselves for feeling as though we can't move forward because we need to sit in blame and resentment. We don't.
No. And I would think that from statistics that I've read that the mother wound, especially with women of color and women who come from maybe an immigrant background or those in poverty, suffer more so in silence than most people because if I'm not mistaken, they're taught to have to be strong to pick themselves up, not talk about things. And I'm thinking that they must have a much more difficult time to work on this issue of the mother wound.
Absolutely. There's a wonderful saying, you can't judge a fish for how well it climbs up a tree. If you keep telling that fish that, they can't do it, they will grow up believing and thinking and really intrinsically knowing that they cannot do it. So we have to be very, very careful now moving forward to change the conversation and to change the meaning making that we attach to words and to understand context. There's a lot of wonderful, very intelligent, very smart, very motivated people across all sections of life, who feel exactly as you're describing, that their situation determines how far they can go, or their belief in what the system thinks of them determines where they can go. And we really need to address that meaning making that we all think, because just because we think it doesn't make it so.
That's true. And we have to learn to rethink our thoughts in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say, I like to call it unlearning. We have to unlearn what we've learned. They call a blueprint simply because it's an imprintation. We can change it.
Right. Not set in stone. Right. Exactly.
And this is the lovely thing about meaning making. We can change our wording about things. We can change how we receive things so that we change the perception that we have of things and make them mean something different. And the beauty of the work that I do is that, when we see that we can make something mean less, we also see that we can make it meaningless. Which allows us to go forward. So again, talking about the mother wound, when we understand context, when we understand that intergenerationally, that our parents are taught what they're familiar with, it just keeps moving forward. And we become, if we allow ourselves the gift of space and time to become acutely aware of, our gaps and our shortcomings. And that's where the forgiveness can come in. I realize now, for an example, that, my mother was XXX, and this is why I feel like I am this, that, or the other, or that I didn't get enough of this, that, or the other. But this doesn't have to define who I am moving forward.
Right. Because our past does come with us. That's just how it is. It does come with us. It's how we perceive that past.
Exactly. And perception is not linear. This is the beauty. It's like you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Right. So the beauty of it is that, if you just take some time, to be with yourself, or to work with a professional, or to do some journaling, you can really start looking at what you're writing, or feel what you're feeling, and get into that proverbial onion and start seeing, there's layers to this. Like, now I understand why I think this way, or why I'm reactive this way, or why that triggers me. And I don't have to make it mean that. Right?
Exactly. Yes. And it's funny though, because boundaries do come into play here as well. I mean, because let's face it, the relationship, the mother-child relationship, is probably one of the most important relationships in one's life. And yet boundaries do have to be set, right? Because again, boundaries are important everywhere.
Absolutely. And, it's okay to have to make boundaries, even in our adult ages. I think for a lot of parents too, it's very difficult to see your children growing up. Because I think for a lot of older people, they're still sort of stuck in their perception making and their meaning making. Like when we raise our children, for example, our children are very different, almost week to week or month to month when they're younger. We have to, be very resilient to that and very flexible with that. And we are, this is a wonderful example. Us, you and I having this conversation today will make us different people tomorrow.
Yeah.
Perhaps even on today, but will make us different people tomorrow. I think being open really is a very large aspect and sort of the key to allowing awareness in so that you can begin to feel and sift and sort where you might be feeling certain triggers and where you might be feeling where you're pigeonholed, or where you might be feeling you're not getting enough of something, or where you need more of something. And then you can start looking at, well, how do I start constructing the needs that I need met in my life to be met? And it's a very deep inside job for a lot of people, for most of us, quite honestly. Which is why we tend to dismiss it and ignore it, because with the emotional
takes a lot of work.
Takes a lot of
right?
work.
It's
It's
work.
emotional.
It's not going to happen overnight.
Exactly. And it doesn't feel good. So who wants to feel that, right? Because we're hedonists. Ego protects us. But this is that armor, that we really need to be aware exists and why we're wearing it, so that we can start disrobing, if you will, taking off that armor piece by piece, so that we can become, more full people and become that person that we really have inside ourselves that we've been too afraid to be. And that goes for men and women, I will tell you. So, across the board, when you've got somebody who is angry, when you've got somebody who is resentful, when you've got somebody who is a bully, these are our coping mechanisms. This is how we hide and protect. Big pills to swallow. Big pills to swallow. But there comes a point, I think, in everybody's life where we encounter a situation or something happens, and we realize, gosh, I really don't want to be this person anymore. It's hard, it's trying, it's stressful. I'm not happy. I'm not making those around me happy. I don't know how I don't like rather how I'm, getting this, or I don't like how I'm doing that. And this is where it all begins, when we're open, willing, and ready. But that's the caveat. We have to be open, willing, and ready, because that's the deep work. And as you said, it's hard work and it's emotional, but boy, it is so freeing, once you can get in there and start delayering and identifying, where you're feeling your anger and where you're feeling frustration and resentment, and identifying, all these triggers and going back potentially to those blueprints, right? And it doesn't have to be, your mom or your dad. It can, have been a friend or a neighbor or a student at school,
or a teacher. Yes, absolutely.
A relationship. I mean, every day we're engaging with people, the guy that cuts in front of you, you've always got two choices. You can make it mean something, or you can make it mean less, and the goal really is to keep your wits about you, of course, but keep your emotionality intact, so that you've got peace and well-being, and that you're not bringing into your life any extra added stresses and resentments that really aren't yours to wear.
Right. I mean, because the reality is that there's always going to be something out there. It's really how we react to that something.
Absolutely.
That's our responsibility, how we react to that something.
That's it.
Because that will dictate, right? That will dictate what kind of day you're going to have, what kind of week you're going to have, how you're going to feel physically, because it does involve that as well.
For sure. When I was doing a lot of parenting, parents would come in and say, my kid made me mad, or, now with what I'm doing, my husband made me mad, my wife made me mad, my boyfriend made me mad, this person made me mad. Well, the reality is that, right? You're shaking your head. Nobody makes you mad.
Right.
You choose to welcome that, or you choose to not welcome it. So we allow ourselves to become mad. We allow ourselves
Yes.
to be affected by what's happening around us. And within that, we've got two choices: to accept what's happening around us as happening to us,
Mhm.
or to choose to see what's happening around us as simply just, okay, this is happening around us. Now, what strategies and what techniques am I going to implement so that I can keep, my level-headedness and not make this about me? Or how do I approach this situation where I'm the mediator, where I'm helping the other person, or where I'm choosing to lead by example, or where I'm giving more of what I want? And that, again, is a big pill to swallow. All of these aspects about who we are, ego tries to deflect, right? Because
Yes.
ego never wants us to take responsibility. That doesn't feel good, right? That's where the emotional is difficult. But it is us. It is us. And it's another aspect of where boundaries come in, and I get asked the question a lot, well, what and who are boundaries for? Are boundaries to keep them away, or are boundaries to keep myself protected?
Both.
I'm not right. And sometimes more one than
the other. Yes.
But ultimately, it's an inside job. We set boundaries for ourselves, right? Because we have no control over what people do, think, they feel, right? No control. But we have control.
No, not at all.
Not at all. So they can break boundaries, or they can attempt to break boundaries, left, right, center. Whether or not they do is up to us.
Yes, exactly.
Right? We either allow it or not. And that's where sustainable boundary building and the work that I do comes into big play here, because I teach my clients how to set sustainable boundaries, so that's the segue. So that's
such important work, right? Important work, powerful work.
Very important work, because you learn that you have all the power in more ways than one. And I'm not talking about holy power. I'm talking about, I've got my 2 feet firmly planted on the ground, and I know what my negotiables and my non-negotiables are. And you can try all you want to break me down or to break my boundaries down. When we are very certain of what our boundaries are, what we need, what we don't need, what we want, what we don't want, what's negotiable and what's not negotiable, it is then up to us to maintain that steadfastness, so that they understand that we are not willing or interested in allowing you to come in and knock down the boundary. And
well, isn't it the responsibility of the self?
It is
right?
Fully the responsibility of the self. And again, more hard work. Because at the end of the day, who wants to do all this hard work? Nobody. But unfortunately, if you're not doing this hard work for yourself, you're allowing everybody to treat you exactly how they're treating you when you're not liking it.
Right. Yeah. And then you have really nobody to blame but yourself. Ultimately.
Unfortunately, yes. But there's so much wonderful power, feminine power, masculine power, control power, feeling an immense amount of deep confidence. That's the kind of power that I'm talking about. When you can speak up and show up and say, this is not okay for me, or stick to your nose and not be a people pleaser, and stay in that container of, I'm committed to myself, and nothing's going to break my boundaries down, and still see them try to negate or to break those boundaries down. It's like a tug of war with rope, right? You're each on either end. If you stick to your guns
Mhm.
they will eventually stop tugging because you're not moving. So this is the beauty of boundaries and working with the blueprint and showing people the path down which they can stride with pride, with
Mhm.
their footing firmly on the ground, to learn and to see and to feel that they can show up confidently and speak up without worry and without fear and have their needs met and live, these
Mhm.
wonderful, productive, passionate lives, being who they really, really are inside deep down, and they don't have to hide anymore.
And as we know, oftentimes a lot of familial interactions, interpersonal
Mhm.
dealings cause a lot of the um, attempts to break boundaries down. So that's
Yeah. And that
it's
that
something
can,
people have to stay struggle with. A lot of people struggle with that.
sure, that's a struggle that comes up a lot in my practice.
Oh, I would
And
assume so. Yes.
well, I mean, this is human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to ask ourselves, what are we fighting here? Are we fighting the person or are we fighting the problem? When we get into
Yeah.
altercations like that, we're not fighting the problem. We're fighting the person. No,
Yeah.
I didn't. You did. This is the armor,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you know the right strategies and when you understand yourself and when you choose to be open and mindful for the greater good, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, you learn very quickly that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to have someone come to you and say, listen, I know you were trying to do this, but in doing so, it made me feel hurt or whatever it is, without then being triggered and having a reactionary response.
And that's
Uh,
where the communication comes
right,
into play
right, right.
that we all have to work on. We all, I mean, that's,
All the time.
we're all
Yeah,
included in that. We have to work on that all the time.
for sure.
Communication and make
So,
sure that our point is
yeah,
getting across and getting across effectively and that it's being actively listened to.
sorry, my
And
dog's
by
sorry,
that's no,
sorry, hang on. Sorry.
that's okay. Life happens. That's no problem. No, no problem at all. That happened. That's just how it is. But yes, that's really what it is, that we all have to learn effective communication skills.
We do.
And
And we have to remember that are we fighting the person or are we fighting the
mhm,
problem? And fighting the person, are we fighting the person or are we just armoring up?
mhm,
Because, it's very difficult emotionally for anybody, really, because we're not wired that way because of ego, as you know,
mhm,
to be blamed, to have caused harm to somebody.
mhm,
Um, and so the armor needs to be recognized that it's being worn. And that's where we need to work on connective relationships and
mhm,
working towards really being mindful and respectful of each other.
mhm,
And yes, that means that we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. But I
mhm,
think at the end of the day, being vulnerable and sharing how you feel in order for you to feel as though you're a whole person in the attempt to get your needs met is very important, and that risk is greater um, than living with all of that tucked very, very deep
mhm.
inside, walking around with anger and resentment all day, because
Yes.
that certainly is no way to live. That's
No,
a lot of work.
no, not at all. And so let me ask you, how can people get a hold of you? How can they get in touch with you? I know you're in Canada.
I am in
Is
Canada. I'm
yes.
in Toronto. I'm on LinkedIn at
Mhm,
Lauren Millman, Millman. Um,
And I'll put everything, all of the contacts in the notes section so that
Perfect.
people can reach you. And
That's
so they can contact you that way. Is
They
there
can
any,
contact me.
and
They
do you
can
have a Facebook page for your business?
They can contact me through LinkedIn. It's probably
That was the best.
best place, or they can email me at lauren@laurenmillman.com. I'm happy to have conversations with anybody who's, you know, interested or who's basically fed up with not having their needs met, who, you know, really want to step in and live the life that they were meant to live without it being too late to live it.
Yes, exactly. Well, I thank you so much for coming today. I so appreciate it that you came to speak to the audience. Always important information, powerful information. I love the work that you're doing, and hopefully you can come back and we can discuss more about the direction that you're going, and talk more about boundaries. This is always so important.
I would love that, Marisa. Thank you so much.
Once again, thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Absolutely love that. Thank you.
Bye, Lauren.
Bye. Take care.